What's happening, guys? Ryan here with RPK Customs. Today we have a KR V2 build for Derek. This was actually my first KR V2 that I've built. I've weathered a ton of V2s, but for some reason the KR has always skipped me by. Now, this is probably the most intensive V2 build that I've done to date, so this might be a pretty lengthy video. This was in pretty rough shape when I first got it. It was missing the emitter nipple, and it was replaced with a TLJ style blade plug, this one here, which is not accurate to a Return of the Jedi V2. So I had to machine a new emitter nipple. And the pommel cap that it came with had a gaping hole drilled right through the center of it. So this is the pommel cap that it came with. It also had a piece of like an aluminum disc that was glued on the face to try to give the impression that this was a solid pommel. So I wanted to machine a new pommel cap for Derek too. But Derek was kind enough to give me pretty much full control over this build, which is great. It's always nice when a client trusts me with their hilts and just kind of gives it to me and says, go for it. That takes a lot of weight off my shoulders, so I really do appreciate that. Derek told me to weather this as if it was my own personal V2, so that's exactly what I've done here. Now, as far as the hardware, Derek sent a Wanawanga clamp lever, a Wanawanga boot stud, a Wanawanga D-ring. He chose to go with a Solos Hold cone knob. He included a Sloth Furnace clamp card, and then we went with a Roman Prop Graflex replica clamp. Now, I've done a lot of machining to make this as accurate as I could for Derek. So I guess I'll start going over some of the major modifications I've done, starting with the emitter. And like I said, this came with the TLJ style blade plug, so I had to turn a new emitter nipple on my lathe. And the grenade section is something that I knew I wanted to modify as soon as I took this out of the box. I'm pretty sure Cal over at KR wanted these hilts to be slightly idealized. So the valleys of the grenade section just came to a sharp point. You can see that. Let me grab a piece of paper. Might be able to see a little bit better. So you can see that I've put this in the lathe and I rounded out the valleys in there. And I also meticulously went in and changed the angles of each one of these rings in the grenade section. And I also went ahead and added this little groove right here. That we see in the photos of the actual prop. Very, very subtle details, but they do kind of stand out when you have this in hand. So moving down to the pommel. Now I basically remachined this entire pommel. Like I said before, the pommel cap was basically destroyed because of that gaping hole. And after looking at it a little bit, I'm not even sure this was the original pommel cap. The machine finish doesn't match up. It was a little bit off. So I went ahead and I made this new pommel cap. Now I ended up sacrificing the old threads from this pommel cap to use on my new one. I did that for two reasons. One is it's a severe pain to do any kind of threading on my machine since my machine's fairly small and it's a manual. I would have to take it apart and change out a bunch of gears to be able to do this thread pitch. But the main reason I did it is because it's very hard to machine something secondhand and have this seam line right here match up perfect. So by cutting the old threads off and gluing them onto the new pommel cap, and then putting this on end and putting pressure down on it, that ensures that this would meet up absolutely perfect, which it has. So that's just a little tip for anybody that is new to this, new to machining, and kind of new to modifying parts. It wouldn't be, if I tried to do this with my lathe, it wouldn't be horrible. It would still be serviceable. It just wouldn't be as perfect. So I used JB Weld. Here, I'll take this off so you guys can see it. I used JB Weld to glue the threads on, and I machined this with enough clearance so that it's a tight fit, but it still had enough room to accept the glue. And JB Weld, just if anybody has ever used JB Weld, you know that it cures up extremely strong. So this is permanent. You can tighten this down as tight as you want. You don't have to worry about the glue breaking free or anything like that. It's solid. Okay, so I wanted the new pommel cap to be basically the same width as the space here where the boot stud rides. And you can see in the reference photos that these two pieces here, right there where the boot stud rides and the pommel cap, they look extremely close to each other. And the old pommel cap was actually a lot bigger than what the new one is. This old pommel cap actually stuck out past the flat spots here in between the pommel cubes. So I wanted to thin this out a little bit, but in order to thin this out a little bit and have it look right, I had to reprofile the bottom of the pommel cubes, which worked out anyway because I kind of wanted to reprofile them anyway. So now you can see I matched that up. It looks pretty good. Looks as it should. And since I had the pommel section in the lathe, because for anybody who has had one of these KRs, you know that it's solid from, it's just one solid piece, not solid aluminum, but it's just one solid piece from the top of the clamp to the bottom of the pommel cubes here. So since this was in the lathe, I went ahead and I reprofiled the bottom of the booster section. Now these booster sections originally come rounded out, but you can see in the reference photos that it is a straight angled line. So I went ahead and added that. Now, something that Derek and I didn't talk about is me adding this little machining mistake right here in between the pommel cubes. So this is actually the first time Derek is going to be seeing this. Something like this is very difficult to add with a CNC machine because everything's computerized. Everything kind of has to be perfect. So I would argue that the only way to do this and have it look right is to do this with a manual machine. And I have a method that I use that I'm pretty happy with. So I decided to throw this on there for him just to give the hilt an extra layer of detail, make it look a little bit more accurate. So now that all that's out of the way, I can move on to the weathering itself. Now, I went about the paint job just like I would any other build. I used Trooper Trent stencil sets. This set was actually made for my old Gen 4 V2 kit. So I had to modify them slightly so that they would work with the KR, since the KR and my old V2 are different sizes. And this is something that Derek and I talked about. He gave me the green light to go ahead and try to use these on my build since I already had the stencils on hand. And I think they turned out pretty good. The booster section is a little bit bigger than the booster section on mine, so I had to alter the size a little bit, and I had to alter the size of the emitter. But they came out good. I did the accurate pommel or not pommel damage. I did the pommel damage too, but I did the accurate emitter dings all the way around. And there's the pommel damage. Now the clamp, on the other hand, is something that I've never really done before. On the original prop, you can see there's a few spots of, where you can see that the plating is damaged a little bit, whether that's rust or just damaged plating. I'm not really sure, but I used a rust compound. Now this is the same rust compound that I used on my V3 clamp lever from a few videos back. And this is semi-permanent, meaning that you can handle this all day long. You can rub your hand on it. It won't rub off. It won't get on your fingers. But it's epoxy based. So if you just take a cotton swab with a little bit of acetone, you can actually rub this right off. And you can soak the whole thing in acetone and get the clamp back to its clean state. And I also added a little bit of rust right here on the Wanawanga lever. You can see in the reference photos that the clamp lever on the real prop looks a little bit dingy. So I wanted to replicate that. And it's the same thing, same rust compound that I used. So you don't have to worry about that coming off. And I also added a little bit of grit in the stamping of the Graflex clamp, just to make it look a little bit more vintage. Okay. Oh, I didn't show the lever, or not the lever, the boot stud. I also weathered the boot stud. I just kind of wore these nubs off a little bit. I blued the steel, and then I added just a little bit of rust in there. I don't know if you can see it. Just to kind of make that look a little bit more vintage too. So this hilt, I locked this hilt together with the 3 set screws that are provided on the kit. Now it's normally a twist and lock, but the grooves that the set screws ride in were pretty chewed up when I got the hilt. And by the sounds of it, Derek is just going to be using this as a static hilt anyway. So I just decided to go ahead and lock this down so it's all solid. If you need to access the inside for whatever reason, obviously you can still unscrew the pommel cap and gain access that way. If you need to get access to the twist and lock, just let me know and I can kind of walk you through it. It's just a little bit of a process. But I think that'll about do it for this video. I want to thank Derek again for kind of giving me the reins and letting me play around with this kit. I had a lot of fun with this one, and I hope he enjoys it just as much as I enjoyed building it. So thanks for watching, everyone, and may the force be with you.